welcome to the show. It's been a while since I made a video and I wanted to hop on and talk about all the developments in the XRP ecosystem and kind of give you an update about what's going on with me. So stay tuned. Hey, Molly Elmore here. I know it's been a little while since I been making some videos, so I want to kind of fill you in on my perspective on the XRP ledger ecosystem, what's been going on. RLUSD is about to launch. What does that mean? And has sort of the thesis that I've kind of publicly shared, has that changed or are we still on schedule? So to start, in the last couple months, obviously, the market value of XRP has gone up about 5x, which has been pretty exciting. Took a little bit of the sting off of, kind of waiting patiently forever and ever. And I had made a decision just in my own personal finances to hold all of my savings in XRP a while ago. And that was sort of out of concern that the fiat system could collapse at any time. And I didn't want to kind of screw myself over by having all my money in fiat. And so fortunately, that decision was made at a good time. So, it went up 5x, which is pretty cool and awesome. However, I do think that the value of XRP is going to go up substantially more. Yesterday, I put a post on Twitter, X, that was kind of a retweet of a post about Swift and how the value of XRP, should be somewhere in the $10,000 range. And I just made the point that there's asymmetrical risk for the financial system around the value of XRP. So let's say, I happen to believe this is going to happen, let's say that XRP becomes a dominant exchange currency for global trade, for things like derivatives, for potentially, institution payments. And it's kind of, think about how much money moves just in the global trade market each year and in the global kind of derivatives market that is often built off of those other global trade things like, the commodities futures and that type of thing. So let's say XRP is used for that at scale. And one of the things that was very interesting about one of the models that we built for the XRP valuation paper was this idea of a collateralization model. And the value that we figured out, it's almost like an umbrella insurance policy that if you are going to move a lot of value on the XRP ledger, when you set up the system, you want to plan for the worst case scenario. So with an umbrella insurance policy, you've got all your assets, right? Maybe your house, your cars, or whatever. And you want to have coverage to cover the worst case scenario, right? You want to have enough money potentially available should all of it burn down, right? And that's why, you don't really get insurance out for what you think you will need. You get insurance out by definition for the worst case scenario. So in the collateralization model for XRP, if let's say all of the global trade were to be moved on the XRP ledger, you want to make sure that the value of XRP is high enough. So should the worst case scenario happen, where every little thing is being transacted at the same time, which of course is an unlikely scenario, but that's not the point. The point is that it could happen. So you want to build a system that can handle the worst case scenario. And so to have the value of XRP be very, very high covers those worst case scenarios. And if the XRP value is low, it introduces this risk that what if a whole bunch of people were trying to transact at the same time and there just isn't enough XRP available for that because it's priced too low. So if you forget about the idea that there's even retail investors at all, imagine you are the architect of a new monetary system where we know that the dollar system has been used as a political weapon. Nobody wants to give that obligation to another country. And most countries like China and Russia don't even want it, right? Because of the Triffin dilemma, it'll screw over all of their exports. So let's say you're the architect of the system and you want to design something that can't fail or is extremely unlikely to fail and can handle growth. So one of the first calls that the XRP valuation paper committee did, Patrick Riley was on it. And he was talking about how there's a lot of asteroids that have precious metals in them, and that, in our lifetime or whatever, there will be technology to go and mine those minerals. So it's like lithium and other things like that, gold, whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is that there are sources of value, money, that aren't kind of part of the current system that could very likely be part of it one day. And the point is that if you're building a new financial system and you know that it's possible like new sources of money or wealth or minerals or whatever could enter the system at some point, you want to build your architecture and to allow for like the worst case scenario. Like somebody finds an asteroid and there's like a quadrillion dollars of value in it. You want to make sure that if that money was entered into the monetary system, it's not fiat that's printed out of nothing. These are actually real assets that have value. If those things were introduced into the system, you would want to be sure that it could handle that. I would want to be sure. And so in order to do that, it makes sense that XRP has an extremely high value per unit, per coin, so that should the worst case scenario happen, you don't have a liquidity crisis. Now, this is irrelevant of the fact about whether that worst case scenario would happen. Actually, you probably, if you're the architect, you don't want it to happen. You don't really want your system to be stress tested to the worst extreme scenario, right? So pricing the value of the asset very high makes the likelihood of that extreme scenario unlikely. So it's sort of a responsible thing to have the value be extremely high. And no one, I think, would be debating this if this idea of retail investors wasn't even a thing. Let's say like nobody had been allowed to buy XRP except institutional institutions or sovereign nations from the beginning, right? Let's just say that hypothetically that had been the case. And we were discussing a global trade and a global monetary system that uses XRP as a bridge currency. And you talk about how much money gets moved globally from all these different markets, and you added it up and you figured out what's all the money, and you were like, I'm architecting the system. What would XRP have to be value-wise to ensure that there's no problems? You would price it high, like, because there wouldn't be this emotional business with the value of it. The reason, so it's funny. So I posted this thing the other day about this asymmetrical risk thing, and I didn't really think much. I just sort of was thinking to myself, and sometimes when I think to myself, I write these posts on Twitter. It wasn't intended to be like a strong stance or like this is definitively going to happen. And it's just amazing the backlash, sort of negative, hostile responses that I will get anytime I post something that concerns the value of XRP being high. I'm not telling anybody to buy it. If you honestly like, if you're not really on the XRP train by now, like, you maybe aren't meant to be on it. Those of us who have known about this asset for years and kind of studied it and learned about it when the value is very low, we were kind of selected, I think, for that, especially if you spoke publicly about it and took all the heat that posting publicly about XRP invites. So the reason why I think people have such a difficult time with it is because it creates this scarcity like trigger that people are scared to get emotionally attached to this value because they think of how it's going to affect them personally. Stop doing that when you're trying to evaluate these assets and their use cases. Your own personal money issues are just going to cloud your judgment. Trust me, I've had plenty of money issues in my life. I'm still working on some of them. But in this case, with the XRP ecosystem, I have been able to separate myself and my own kind of portfolio from like, what are sovereign nations concerned with? And if you were to architect a financial system that would serve global trade and ensure world peace, prevent the Triffin dilemma from having to affect any other nation, stop this kind of endless war business that the fiat system has been funding. If you were to be the architect of that, what would be most important to you? I take those questions into consideration when I'm trying to understand, like, what is this ecosystem really about and how would you value things appropriately? And it just flabbergasts me when people are not able to have this conversation rationally because they just start thinking about how a bunch of XRP holders would become really wealthy in that. And they're like, and that can't happen, or that won't happen, or that shouldn't happen, or the people in charge won't allow that to happen. And there's all these kind of like reasons why that it's almost like a too good to be true. So I don't want to believe in it or hope in it. But I want you to separate having a discussion around a global monetary system versus people's investment portfolio. Because if you are architecting something that's going to affect how everyone on the planet kind of moves products around, like you just, they're just not going to care if a couple of retail people, and it's really a couple, it's not that many people relative to the people on the planet. Yes, a group of people are probably going to do very well. And I actually think that many of those people understand that they're being given a blessing and have this almost humanitarian obligation to deploy those funds for some good purpose and not just go and buy a bunch of junk or whatever. This is why I think, on this channel, historically, I've posted some more like spiritual, esoteric things in addition to things about blockchain, because I really do think money is energy. I mean, think about it. When you go to a job, let's say you have a manual labor job, you are in construction, you exert energy, and in exchange for that energy, you are given money as a placeholder for that energy. And then you use that to go buy some other kind of energy, whether it's gasoline or food or electricity for your house or whatever. It's energy and money are very closely related. And the more you understand how energy works, the easier it is to understand this money thing. And when people have limiting beliefs around their own worth and around what's possible for them and about wanting to avoid getting disappointed, that creates these defense mechanisms where it's like, don't even talk about this thing being worth so much because this could then get my hopes up, and I don't want to get my hopes up and get disappointed. And the way they say that, though, is they pretend they're looking out for all these other people. And they're like, oh, you're shilling this coin for all these people, and it's a pump and dump scam. And I'm like, I'm not shilling anything. I'm trying to figure out how the new global financial system is going to work. And I'm just actually just genuinely interested in it. And, how do these various assets play into it? Who does what? How are these decisions made? What would the value have to be in order for this to work? I mean, I bought a bunch of XRP years ago, and I'm not selling it until I feel like divinely guided to move it into some other sort of value. So I'm not recommending anybody buy anything. And I know people are going to disagree with me on this, but like when I post on XRP, post on Twitter or whatever about XRP, or even in this video, I'm not doing it because I'm suggesting to anybody to buy it. Like, do whatever you want. I honestly don't really care about what other people's investments are. I years ago had a coaching program. I was helping women learn about crypto. I didn't like doing that, to be honest. I didn't like encouraging people to make investments with their money based on my guidance because I was like, I could be wrong. Like, I'm figuring this out as I go along. I know that I trust myself to make these decisions on my own. The women who are in that program, many of whom I'm still in touch with, I mean, they're very appreciative of my candor about that. But like, I don't really want to be in a position where I'm advising people on what to invest in with this asset class because it's not a normal market. Like we're looking at the change from one monetary system to another. There's been all this secrecy around it. We've been trying to figure out, decoding messages, whether they're like BIS and World Bank white papers where they're alluding to things, or if it's even more like direct coding business with like these Riddler stuff. There's all these kind of fascinating and interesting things. That's why, I love that we have social media as a place to figure things out together and have conversations. What's just annoying and frustrating is that when you get into discussions around price, this like annoying noise of people just being negative and generally criticize you personally because they don't really have a good counter argument for the ideas themselves other than to just call it a scam or fake or whatever. And I'm like, I'm trying to have a conversation where we're figuring these things out, and you bring nothing of value by just being like a distraction while we're trying to kind of uncover things. So my new policy now on X is that if anyone attacks me personally, I'm just going to block you. Like there's really no positive or there's no necessary reason for me to allow those completely unproductive conversations into the dialogue. Like, so just go away. So just be warned. If you're planning on being obnoxious, just get ready to say goodbye. And what's kind of nuts too is I am a believer in energy pendulums. So we see these pendulums with every single political debate. There's always two sides, right? The right and the left, and the red and the blue. And pendulums swing back and forth. And the more heated a topic, like the more energy the pendulum has, and people get like fired up and fierce and stuff. And I think pendulums can also happen at an individual level. And what I've noticed too sometimes is whenever I put out a post like the one I did yesterday, where it kind of really pushed people to get excited about this ecosystem. So it's sort of like a positive one. I'm going to get this backlash, right? And so that's where all the haters come in. And actually, the Twitter algorithm loves this generally because it keeps, it's like a heated debate, even though a lot of the criticism is just personal attacks that aren't actually legitimate criticisms of the point I was trying to figure out. And yesterday I got my first like extortion death threat, which was crazy. Actually, it was this morning. And I was like, you know what? This fits. Like I'm tired. I made the choice. I put this post out on X. Like I don't have to do that. And I got all this backlash, but I also got a lot of nice comments. And then I get a death threat thing. And now, it's fascinating to participate in this matrix game that we're living in, being aware of like how these energetic things work. And by the way, I'm not worried about this death threat. People can write whatever they want on Twitter. Like I am spiritually protected. I'm not worried about that at all. But when you see these energetic pendulums going back and forth, even when you're participating in it, like I am with this one from yesterday, I'm at least at the level where I'm observing it, and I can even just kind of laugh at it and not get sucked into it and take it all personally. Like about a year and a half ago, I guess, when we put those, almost 2 years ago, when we put those XRP valuation Twitter threads out, many of you were around for that, and I took a lot of heat on some of those models posts, those Twitter threads. And I was new to being criticized publicly at that time, and it took it personally, and it was upsetting that there's like one whole weekend where one of those things was going nuts, and I had all these kind of venomous, I would call them critics, but they're really just mean, like these venomous, mean people just spewing negativity at me, and I didn't really know how to handle it, and it bothered me and upset me. But you go through that enough times, you do develop a thick skin, which is valuable in one regard. You find out like people can criticize you all they want. Shouldn't actually change anything in your actual life. But now I'm actually at the point where I can observe these things and either laugh at them or just not allow any of that and like that negativity to come inside me or whatever. All right. So is everything playing out as we thought? So yes, it does appear that is the case. So I've thought for a very long time that Ripple or XRP and Stellar were kind of split for antitrust reasons. So I think they were split intentionally so that there's two very, very similar ecosystems serving different markets. There are some fundamental differences. I mean, Stellar's got smart contracts. The consensus mechanism is a little different. But fundamentally, it keeps these two walled gardens separate. So in the unlikely event that something bad happened with one, you're not going to take out the whole global financial system. You've got these two very similar systems, one that will primarily serve the institutional sovereign world, in my opinion, one that will serve more institution to retail, to people. And they serve the very different use cases, work equally, similarly quickly, and so I think that appears to be playing out as expected. So I don't know if it's as much antitrust necessarily as much as making sure that you aren't, it's like a risk management. I mean, I think a lot of the design of this was, all right, we want to have this one ecosystem, but if there's only one sort of network and there's a problem with that network, you'll take everything out. This way we've got two networks that run in parallel very closely. So if you had to switch to the other one, you could do that. So it seems like a good hedge risk-wise to have Stellar and Ripple, XRP run in parallel. When RLUSD came out, people got freaked out and nervous that it was somehow like a replacement for XRP, which I've never thought that at all. RLUSD is a sovereign stable coin. It's a sovereign currency, meaning like the nation. Now, I do really strongly believe that we are going through a transition from the Federal Reserve note world where fiat was printed. You could look at it two ways. It was either printed out of nothing or it was printed with US citizens as collateral on the loan because Federal Reserve notes are debt instruments, so they are loans, they're bonds. Then you have this new world that I believe we are entering, where we're going to see the reemergence of the US Republic, and the US Republic will oversee the Treasury, which will issue a dollar, an actual dollar, not a Federal Reserve note, a dollar that is backed by some kind of asset, very likely gold, potentially silver. I'm not exactly sure of that, but I'm pretty confident gold will be definitely part of that. I already know the US Republic is being formed. I had a call this week with a woman who's involved in one of the sort of state level republics. I now know of 3 states from direct contact with people who are working on those republic initiatives that these republics are being formed, currencies issues are being worked out, and all of their policy stuff. So it's not like some random hopium someone's trying to figure out from like a bunch of Twitter searches if these republics are moving forward. I've actually been on meetings and spoken with people who are working on the teams that are launching these new republics. And so what that means, though, is these republics need their own sovereign currency for the purposes of global trade. So if you understand what XRP is fundamentally, you have 2 countries, we'll call them, and one wants to sell commodity to the other one. Neither wants to hold the other one's currency. They can each hold their own and use XRP as this intermediary or bridge currency for purposes of trade. So RLUSD could very likely be the new US Republic asset-backed dollar. I don't know why it couldn't be. I don't know that it will be. So don't go saying this is a fact, but at some point we're going to be transitioning back to this actual government issued dollar and not this third party private corporation Fed Reserve note that's a debt instrument. So that switch has to happen. And it's interesting timing because spiritually things often, start at the beginning of the year. It's a new year. Sometimes even these accounting ledgers, it's easier to start a new system on the first year. I realize that many companies and countries and whatever work on different calendars throughout the year, fiscal calendar. I don't know if January 1st fits into that strategically, but sort of energetically, like January 1st is considered first part of the year. I know we have this business with the calendar. Maybe they're supposed to be 13 months, but so I don't know. It's the middle of December. Things don't usually start very aggressively around Christmas time because people are just out of the office and not really working as much. So getting RLUSD into market in preparation for new January stuff seems like it makes a lot of sense. Trump has talked about the golden age. We're entering a new golden era. He uses the word gold a lot. Kind of fits if you were going to go back to gold-backed money. Judy Shelton's book is out. It's making a lot of rounds about this idea of a gold standard and kind of planting that idea back into people's heads. We've seen a lot more mentions of the idea of asset-backed currencies, asset-backed digital currencies. So all the sort of indicators that have been in place for a long time around moving back to sound money, we're seeing evidence of that. Now, Ripple also made it clear that they went through great lengths to get their stablecoin licensed and like approved. So it's going to be audited regularly, which was always a strange thing to me about Tether. Like it almost was like they intentionally didn't want to be audited, but claimed that everything was legit. It just seemed like there was so much smoke around Tether and the audits. So it like set the stage quite nicely for RLUSD to enter. And immediately people are like, are you going to be audited? And they're like, yes, of course, all transparent. So I don't know if people would have known about that or cared about that as much if there hadn't been all this Tether stuff for a long time. So Tether's a fascinating story. I still do believe it's been used by the banking cartel in the last couple of years. Otherwise, they would have just shut it down. But it's a way for them to move money in and out of it's like a back door, like a secret door to move money out of the banking system without having to follow the rules that are in place. Okay, so we see Stellar and XRP Ripple are doing their thing separately, serving different markets. minimizing the risk of if one went down, the other, it would take everything out. We're seeing that we're now going to have a sovereign stable coin for the US Republic potentially, which would be pretty cool. Other nations, so this is where like this CBDC word that became so like maligned, like people hated and were terrified of this word CBDC. Well, it's because we don't like this word CB, with like the central bank idea. But sovereign currencies are necessary. Each country that wants to participate in global trade has to have a currency with which to buy it. And it serves the interests of their citizens if they have their own sovereign currency that they control the monetary policy for. So I've been writing this paper. I haven't finished it yet. I kind of got a little bit stuck on the CFA franc, which is a French issued currency for 14 countries in kind of Western Central Africa. And the French, who I think if you are a French colony, you're screwed. Like pretty much the French have left every place they have been colonizers of in absolute squalor. I mean, look at the situation in Haiti. Martinique is poor, and some of the poorest countries in Africa are formerly French colonies. So when the French were kind of kicked out, they left their claws in one thing, which is this CFA franc, which is kind of pegged to the euro in terms of value. So they're pretending it is all this monetary stability, but the euro's been inflating like the dollar has. And what these French countries have had to do is they have to put up 50% of the amount of currency issued to them in reserves. So if you wanted $1 million of CFA franc to be used in your country, like Ivory Coast, then you would have to put up $500,000 in gold or commodities or something, and it kind of sits there. But the French kind of custody, and they can trade it on their sovereign trading markets and make money off of it. So the CFA franc is certainly not doing a service to these countries in Africa, in my opinion, and I think it'd be great when we move back to asset-backed money to help see these African nations have their own currencies based on the valuable assets that they have within the country, and not just have the French or other European nations steal it. So I'm also going to make it my personal mission to help any former French colony as much as I can, because I think they have been just horribly treated. And one way would be to help them establish monetary systems, currencies, sovereign currencies that help them be financially independent and prosperous and stop paying homage to the French who have not treated them well at all. And I'll argue with you on this one. I don't think the French are doing anyone in Africa or in Haiti. I don't even know if they're involved in Haiti anymore, but in the CFA franc region, I don't think they're doing anyone any favors at all. They need to go. Okay. That's really nothing to do with Ripple and Stellar XRP though. Okay, back to XRP. Yes, we are seeing that as a bridge currency. We're moving back to these asset-backed currencies. It's potential that RL, which we know it sounds a lot like the real USD, could become our new asset-backed sovereign stablecoin. And that kind of fits everything. Now, do you think that with all the announcements, like I got asked a bunch today if because Ripple announced that this RLUSD is launching, if the price of XRP should go up a lot. I actually don't think it should, and I don't really want it to. Like I've made the point, like ad nauseum for the last couple of years, that the value of XRP should be driven by the virtuous cycle kicking in and not by media hype. I mean, the fact that anything increases in value based on hype, like should be a flag. Things should increase in value because like a stock, like when stocks go up because of hype, that's fake. Like you're just messing with people's heads. Stocks should go up, in my opinion, because of earnings or like productive relationships or something that is actually going to turn into real value and not some kind of hype that's being manipulated by the media. So I'm not saying that the announcement of RLUSD is manipulation at all. I just don't think it should correspondingly drive the value of XRP up a lot because it's not related to utility or store value. So if you're not familiar with the virtuous cycle, it is two competing forces that function kind of like a whirlwind, like a cyclone that increase and accelerate dramatically. So when people start to use XRP for utility purposes, and I'm not talking about you and I'm talking about like sovereign nations or very large institutions that are moving vast amounts of money globally, when that starts to happen and these fiat currencies are on their way out, countries are going to be like, well, we got profit in this commodity we just sold. We've got to store it in something. We could store it in our own stable coin, but we're going to have to switch it back to XRP tomorrow to buy some other widget. why not just hold it in XRP? The value of XRP is steadily going up because of this utility adoption. And so people are now using it to store values that pulls less supply from available for transactions, and that further drives the price up. And it creates these competing forces between the store value and the utility. That is what I strongly and passionately believe will be the major driver of a price increase for XRP. And when people complain, they're like, I've been holding this since 2017. I've been hearing about this for years. Why has nothing changed? It's like, well, because the sovereign nations are not using it yet. There's some kind of flip the switch or some type of agreement in place that has not opened that door yet. And people are like, well, aren't these agreements? Like, well, you're a conspiracy theorist to say there's all these agreements. I'm like, were you not around for COVID? Did you see how the entire world shut down in one day? You don't think there's an agreement about the monetary system if these other coordinated things can happen so quickly? Same thing with SWIFT. I mean, SWIFT is an agreement between like most of the nations of the world to use this kind of messaging system to communicate information about cross-border payments, cross-border value exchanges. Everyone made an agreement to participate in it. So like the idea that to use XRP as a bridge currency isn't also an agreement is short-sighted. These agreements happen a lot. Go look up the Bretton Woods Agreement or the Plaza Accords. Like regularly, world leaders meet to discuss these issues and they make agreements. It's not like a theory. So all of the discussions that I've had publicly on Twitter and in my previous YouTube videos about this asset being used to facilitate global trade at scale, it's all playing out wonderfully. And then when people get upset about the price having to be high, just ask yourself before you like your cognitive dissonance kicks in and you think that it can't be more than $10 or $100. Just imagine you are a global leader, you're at one of these world summits, you're being asked to present your plan for the new financial system. Wouldn't you want to ensure those you're presenting to that you have looked out for all of the major risks? And one big risk would be a liquidity shortage from new value that you're not aware of entering into the system. And if XRP is priced too low, there could be a shortage and trading can't happen. So the way to minimize that risk is to make the value of the asset very, very high so that people don't need a lot and they're less likely to run out. I don't know why you would not want the value high if you are the architect of the system. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that is my belief. I'm sticking to it. I would welcome any thoughts you have. If you're going to attack me personally, just be prepared to be blocked just because I'm not dealing with that anymore. And I don't know when I'll be back for the next one. I kind of feel called to make these videos when certain things happen. I guess I was marginally annoyed with this extortion death threat this morning. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to fucking make another video and we're going to talk about XRP price. I'm going to really piss people off and we'll see. Hopefully I won't bring on any more threats. So anyway, take care. I'll see you in the next one.